And a warm welcome back to the Pitchside Podcast. I'm your host, the HOD of the BSB. Like, share, comment on the YouTube version of this podcast, and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes of the podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify, Google Podcast, or any other platform. And of course, follow us on social media. I'm at PSP on Twitter, Pitchside Pod on Instagram. Join us for more here on the channel, and of course, support us on the way to our first K. Welcome to episode 116. And you're welcome. Crucial and, very eventful, really. And Saturday was, pretty crammed and pretty racked up with matches yesterday. And we're going to start, realistically speaking, from the only place we could start with the Bundesliga and, of course, with the big title decider between RB Leipzig and Bayern Munich. And it was Hans-Dieter Flick's side victorious. 1-0, the tightest of scorelines, but definitely. I would say a deserved victory nonetheless. Not the dominating victory of usual, because, definitely the stats would tell you otherwise. Anyone who watched the game would know that RB Leipzig pretty much dominated the game overall. But Bayern Munich, I think, were pretty effective. They had a good stretch late on in the first half and early on the second half. They scored the goal for Leon Goretzka, 1-0, the assist from Thomas Müller. And, I think a good thing that I would credit Hansi Flick for is that he didn't play with, Serge Gnabry as a false nine, so to speak. With Thomas Müller, because that would create a lot of, bad stuff. Eric Maxim Choupo-Moting, I thought, was pretty good for the amount of time he had. For the game that he had, I think he was really, really good. Maybe he didn't score, but that's because Bayern didn't have a lot of chances rather than him being bad or anything. I think Bayern were pretty conservative in this one, a more defensive performance from Bayern. Not sticking in the back, but pretty much conserving the energy, really, in that game. Bayern Munich now, with this victory, they settled the title. It's their 9th title in a row. Congratulations, I would say, for them. 7 points now at the top of the Bundesliga. There's no real chance for RB Leipzig really catching up to them in any way, shape or form. In fact, if anything, Leipzig should be worried about losing their second spot to Wolfsburg behind them. But anyway, it is incredible, really, when you talk about, when you're going to be talking about Bayern Munich in last night's game. It was an unusual performance by every metric possible. It wasn't the rampant performance of Bayern, as usual. For the whole game, Bayern Munich had 5 shots on target, which is not Bayern Munich, by the way. This is nothing like Bayern Munich, and 9 total shots in the game. Sometimes they have less possession, but definitely not the less of chances. Yesterday, it was the case, and, RB Leipzig, for the game that they had, I thought they were pretty ineffective, and it's creeped once again to their side, the fact that they cannot score goals. For some reason, it just bites them when they play with a false 9. It bites them in the wrong times, and certainly yesterday was a wrong time for that formation to bite them. A couple of points here and there. Upamecano was good. I think he showed why Bayern were really interested in him and why they wanted to buy him so bad, and why he will be a really good asset for them next season. Thomas Müller, I think, proved why we need someone like Thomas Müller in Bayern Munich for the game against PSG in the Champions League. And of course, looking ahead to that game, I really still fancy Bayern Munich to go through overall. Even without Lewandowski, it doesn't seem to be a big problem, although that might not be the case. It might be more of Leipzig being ineffective instead of Bayern being, so strong at the back. I'm still not convinced yet. I want to see a game against PSG against a proper front line in Neymar, Mbappe, and Di Maria. To properly judge how Bayern, with the absence of Lewandowski, could, sort of make the balance count in their game. Bayern Munich certainly head into that game against PSG, and of course, I think knowing the result that they had in France, PSG losing to Lille in their league game, they will probably think that isn't a side that is up for the taking, and that might just slightly put Bayern Munich off their game a little bit. And I know how, sort of middling and average PSG were this season, not just in the league, but in the Champions League as well. They weren't exactly that great. Bayern Munich would think, okay, they were really up for the taking, we really could get them, and, it's going to be an interesting situation as far as Bayern Munich is concerned. But as far as this victory is concerned, A conservative economic victory, realistic from Hansi Flick, not changing the shape, not tinkering the shape. The performances were, mostly good defensively in particular. Again, Eric Choupo-Moting had a decent game. Leipzig dominated, but they couldn't do it in the big moments, and when it mattered, they couldn't finish it off. Bayern Munich heading towards a 9th Bundesliga title, and it looks like RB Leipzig are going to be settling for a top 4 spot in the Bundesliga. They're probably going to be settling for that in the end. I'll tell you a team that won't be settling for a top 4 spot in the Bundesliga, probably Borussia Dortmund, and they dropped points yet again against Eintracht Frankfurt, losing 2-1 away from home. And, that's not good. That is really not good news for Borussia Dortmund, and particularly for a certain Erling Braut Haaland. Borussia Dortmund have been sort of on the edge, really, of reaching the top 4 or playing for Champions League football next season. It's always been discussed how not playing Champions League football next season would affect Borussia Dortmund. And I think this game, weirdly enough, this is not a game where Borussia Dortmund sort of took the lead and just sat in the back and, sat in the back and just let the game flow naturally. Borussia Dortmund dominated the game against Eintracht Frankfurt. They had more opportunities, in the early goings. Eintracht Frankfurt didn't exactly have the brightest of starts to the game, but then, after the first sort of 15 to 20 minutes, Eintracht Frankfurt, had their momentum in the game, but not before Borussia Dortmund helped them on the way to take an early lead, thanks to a Nico Schulz own goal, of course, on the 11th minute. Thankfully for Dortmund, they equalised for the in the end of the first half. Thankfully at that time, really, not throughout the whole game. Thankfully for them, they equalised right before half time, and then, of course, the second half was, a much better start from Eintracht Frankfurt, and then, of course, Borussia Dortmund, took the momentum after the first 15 minutes in the second half. They took the momentum going. They made a host of substitutions. Giovanni Reina was in, Reinier was in. Mahmoud Daoud was in for Jude Bellingham. But, of course, they were too stretched, I think, looking for that second goal. That Eintracht Frankfurt found the space behind them, and Andre Silva managed to make it 2-1 for Eintracht Frankfurt. It's an incredible victory, and of course for Adi Hütter's boys, it is a victory that I think has a lot of value in the standings of the Bundesliga, with Eintracht Frankfurt now 7 points ahead of Borussia Dortmund. This is, I think, the crucial moment where we could say Borussia Dortmund lost the top 4 spot, because had Dortmund won, had even they drew the game, they would keep it 4 points. If they won, they would reduce the gap to 1 single point, and that would have been really, really interesting for Borussia Dortmund. But now with 7 points, it looks most unlikely, really, that Borussia Dortmund are going to be doing, a Champions League participation next season, and also it looks like they will be out of it, really, against Manchester City in the next couple of weeks. So, it doesn't look like a really sort of encouraging end to the season for Borussia Dortmund. And of course, again, the biggest factor in all of this is the fact that Erling Haaland maybe won't stay in Borussia Dortmund if they don't play Champions League football next season. The rest of the Saturday was, pretty uneventful in terms of results. It wasn't surprising, but certainly was entertaining. Bayer Leverkusen defeated Schalke. Of course, they would do that 2-1. No hopes really for Schalke at anything. 2 goals from Lucas Alario and Patrick Schick. The finish, by the way, for the second goal of Patrick Schick was superb. Klaas-Jan Huntelaar, I said it when he came to Schalke. I said when the deal was done, it was, a pretty desperate move and a desperate sort of decision. And certainly the goal that he scored looked more than desperate, despite how beautiful the goal was. The control and the touch, classic Huntelaar, really. But definitely it was nothing to help Schalke in any way, shape or form. They are 10 points at the bottom of the table, and they should be thinking, and I'm sure they're thinking about what they're doing next season to return to the top tier in the Bundesliga. Augsburg defeated Hoffenheim 2-1. The goals coming in early on in the first half for Augsburg. Ruben Vargas and Andre Hahn taking an early lead in the 25th minute, and by half an hour, Augsburg were leading 2-0. Then they left the game to Hoffenheim, who huffed and puffed and tried and roamed around, but they couldn't score until the 85th minute. Robert Skov scoring the consolation goal for them. Wolfsburg, a tight game against Köln, really, just a story of two halves, with Köln taking the first half to them and dominating it, but the second half was all Wolfsburg. In the 69th minute, Josip Bricolo got the win for the Wolves of Germany. Of course, Wolfsburg looks to be set to go to the Champions League next season, to return to the Champions League next season after 5 seasons of missing on that competition. Of course, an incredible performance overall in the season for Wolfsburg, and have been pretty deserving as well of going to the Champions League. Borussia Mönchengladbach defeated Freiburg 2-1. It was not easy for Borussia Mönchengladbach and for Marco Rose, and finally they win a game in the Bundesliga after what seemed like a long streak, really, of bad results for Borussia Mönchengladbach. Roland Zalai, though, took the lead for Freiburg inside 10 minutes, and it looked like Borussia Mönchengladbach are in for another desperate night, but no. In the second half, a quick fire double from Marcus Thuram inside 7 minutes of each other. The goals coming in the 53rd and 60th minutes, given Borussia Mönchengladbach, sort of good 3 points. They could at least make a late surge for some Europa League spots, and that should be really, really interesting for Borussia Dortmund. Of course, only 2 games left. Union Berlin are facing Hertha Berlin in a derby, and Stuttgart are going to be facing Werder Bremen on Sunday. Bayern Munich, of course, 64 points, top of the Bundesliga table, 57 for Leipzig, 54 for Wolfsburg, 50 for Frankfurt, Dortmund 43 for Leverkusen, 39 for Gladbach, 38 for Union Berlin, 37 for Freiburg, 36 for Stuttgart, 32 for Augsburg, 30 for both Hoffenheim and Bremen, Mainz with 25, Hertha with 24, Köln 23, Bielefeld 23. They'd drawn against Mainz, of course, I almost forgot about that, in a battle of relegation. Drawn 1-1 against Mainz 0-5, and Schalke with 10 points at the very bottom of the table. From the Bundesliga to the Premier League, and the Premier League wasn't lacking any sort of surprises, and certainly the early kickoff gave us a lot of them. Chelsea lost 5-2 against West Brom Albion at home in the Stamford Bridge. If you don't believe it, first of all, let that sink in. And of course, if you don't believe it, well, go check out the highlights of the game. It was a crazy old game, really, if you think about it. In fact, it looked for the first, half an hour, really, that, Chelsea were sort of leading the game somehow, dominating, scoring a goal thanks to Christian Pulisic. They looked pretty fine, really, until the equaliser for West Brom. Certainly, they cannot have the excuse of having their players exhausted in the international break, because Reece James wasn't a starter. Jorginho wasn't called up. Kovacic didn't play the full 90 in any of the 3 games for Croatia. Timo Werner wasn't a starter. Christian Pulisic, he was somewhat of a starter in his international break, and he went down injured in the second half, and certainly didn't look. It didn't look like a good situation at halftime. Tuchel was not happy with that. But, after the red card for Thiago Silva, it completely went off for Chelsea. Spaces were suddenly all over the place for West Bromwich Albion to capitalise, and, late on in the second half, the first half, it was, a remontada, a comeback in the late parts, in the stoppage time of the first half. Mateus Pereira scoring twice in the space of 2 minutes in that stoppage time to make it 2-1 for West Brom, who, didn't dominate the first half, didn't really play some strong football. They were defending well, they were trying to sting when they had the opportunities, certainly, tried as they might. They had 3 shots on target, they scored twice in the first half. That is, efficiency for you, compared to Chelsea's 8 shots and 5 shots on target and no scoring. The second half was no different. 4 shots on target for Albion. Guess what? They all went into the net. Almost. 3 of them went in the net, really. Callum Robinson made it 3-1 for West Bromwich Albion. 68 minutes, by Diane made it 68 minutes, and Mateus Pereira was with the assist this time. And then, of course, Mason Mount scored the second by an assist of Timo Werner. Timo Werner, even with the time, he would be happy about his assist. He would be sad about the scoreline overall. And 5-2, Callum Robinson makes it for Chelsea. For sort of West Brom against Chelsea. I'm really convinced that this is was a one-off really for Chelsea. I'm not going to say that this is a disaster and Thomas Tuchel is going to, jump the shark from here and should be sacked and all of that. But this might show why Chelsea are not exactly, they're not exactly near perfect at the moment. And certainly they're not. But, after a long defensive good run with Thomas Tuchel, they conceded only twice inside 14 matches. Now in one match you concede 5. That is not going to just affect this game. This is given, the results of the day around you. This could affect your place eventually on the top of the table because your top 4 spots with performances like these could be hurt. And I know that the red card played a big part in this result and this big loss, but certainly credit to West Brom, credit to Sam Allardyce really. He beats another, big side and gets points out of another big side in the Premier League. They got points now out of Chelsea, out of Man City away from home. They got points out of Liverpool at Anfield. They got points out of Manchester United at their home. It is certainly it's certainly pretty decent season when it comes to these kind of results, these big results from Sam Allardyce. Certainly, it won't help West Brom a lot. They are at the bottom of the table, 19th, 21. They're only above Sheffield United, really, and why Sheffield United are bottom of the table there. But overall, this result won't happen West Brom a lot. However, it would hinder Chelsea a bit, and definitely heading into the Champions League quarter-final tie against Porto, that tie itself isn't easy, and if West Brom could defend this well and score 5, imagine what Porto would do if they found the same space and the same drive. Conte certainly should be a starter in that game. And by the way, the changes that Thomas Tuchel made. They were really affected by the injury of Christian Pulisic. He had to bring on Mason Mount, although he was, a pretty important player for the international break with England. He had to bring him on, and he had to exhaust him late on. Although he scored, so not exactly the worst contributions, he had to bring on Kai Havertz for Jorginho, who didn't play a really good performance. He's been hovering around really since Thomas Tuchel arrived at Chelsea. But overall, again, this is a result that's going to be hindering Chelsea more than helping West Brom on the other side. And of course, the red card is certainly something that Thiago Silva needs to be forgetting about anytime soon. Leeds United defeated Sheffield United 2-1 expectedly, really. This is a game that Leeds United dominated overall. 12 minutes, Jack Harrison opens the score by the assist from Rafinha. Before the stroke of half-time, Ben Osborne makes it 1-1 for Sheffield United, gives it the game, but in the end, a own goal from his fellow player, Vel Jagielka, on his own net, 2-1 for Leeds United. 49th minute, Leeds United, with another victory after the victory they had before the international break, 42 points. And we could say that, could they make a run for a top 4 spot, for a top 6 spot, maybe? We will see what is going to be happening, really. It's going to be interesting to see how things are going to be panning out with Leeds United at the end of the season. Manchester City, Leicester City. Manchester City, though, is I think the game was in England. But overall, a deserved victory for Man City, 2-0. Leicester City had a pretty, resounding defensive performance for most of the first half and the second half. They didn't have a lot of opportunities, if any, really, in the game. Overall, they had only 2 shots on target for the entire game. Obviously, they would have less possession because Man City are Man City and what they are. The saving came from an unlikely source in Benjamin Mendy in the 58th minute before Gabriel Jesus making it 2-0 in the 74th minute. A pretty dominating victory from Man City, and obviously I think a clear message, I would say, to Borussia Dortmund ahead of the Champions League tie between them in the midweek, and of course finishing with Arsenal facing Liverpool. Of course, that victory of the Reds 3-0 at Emirates. I talked about that in the review of the game, and I won't say more than that is a good time, I think, for Liverpool to pick up some wins, and certainly an important moment for Liverpool to try and sort of, make up for the season that they had so far. 2 points behind Chelsea in the top 4 spots. Of course, West Ham played Wolves on Monday, so it will be really, really interesting to see how things are going to be panning out for that battle of the top four. Now, it involves, I think, let's say 5 teams are involved in this one. Chelsea, Liverpool, West Ham, Tottenham and Everton, I think, all involved when it comes to the last qualifying spot for the Champions League from the Premier League standings. Passing by La Liga now in Spain, and only 3 games took place on Saturday. On Friday, Levante lost to Huesca 2-0. Granada, lost to Villarreal at home 3-0. Gerard Moreno with 2 goals to his name in that one, 2 penalties either side of half-time, and also an open play goal, a hat-trick for Gerard Moreno on the day, with Granada missing a penalty later on. Of course, surprisingly enough, both sides are still in the Europa League, and both sides had the Europa League tie to take care of. Granada certainly facing Molde in the quarterfinal, while Villarreal are going to be facing Shakhtar Donetsk. Real Madrid faced Eibar on Saturday, and they defeated them 2-0. And, it wasn't an easy game overall, but they had to scratch and claw, and it had to do with some bad luck as well. They had 3 goals chalked off by VAR on the day. In the first half, they had a couple for Marco Asensio before the goal for him, and had 1 for Benzema, and then they had a legitimate goal for Benzema counted finally. I mean, this was a good victory for Real Madrid. It would feel good, at least in the standings of the Liga. Now they're 3 points behind Atletico momentarily before Atletico plays Sevilla on Sunday. Barcelona still to play Real Valladolid on Monday. You don't really see that going wrong for them. So it's going to be all about El Clasico for Real Madrid. I mean, again, the victory for Eibar against Eibar is important. I mean, Zinedine Zidane, getting another good pragmatic performance, I would say, from his side, and definitely doing right when the time is right. Obviously, ahead of the game against Liverpool, every point matters, and he doesn't want to leave himself hanging, high and dry in the league while thinking about the Champions League. He's taken it one game at a time, Zinedine Zidane, and I like this pragmatic performance from him. He trying to think more of how to sort of, how to make it up against Liverpool in the Champions League, rather than just overthinking it against Liverpool in the Champions League. 2-0 important victory. It wasn't easy. The second half was pretty charged up, particularly with the bad weather in Madrid. It looked like, that might affect them. There was some couple of opportunities. Courtois had to pull out some save, and he almost put himself in a bad situation, almost scoring on his own net. Of course, he had to scramble the ball out of the line to deny Eibar a chance at scoring. And certainly, again, an important victory for Real Madrid. Keeps the hopes in La Liga before El Clasico, 1 week removed from El Clasico, where they're going to be really putting it all on the line against Barcelona in that regard, and of course before the 2 games against Liverpool in the Champions League, which seem very, very crucial for Zinedine Zidane to probably save the season, should the league aspirations go really wrong. Osasuna in the last game of the Saturday defeated Getafe or drawn against Getafe in a goalless game, 0-0. And despite the fact that only Roma in Italy have European football in the next week, and with all the Italian teams being taken out of the European competitions, Napoli gone out, Napoli and Milan going out of the Europa League, of course Inter already gone out in the group stage of the Champions League, you have Juventus also eliminated, Lazio were eliminated at the round of 16, but for some reason the Serie A decided that it's a good time to put all the games of the Serie A in on one day and in one fixture, and just cram the fixtures together. But it was interesting. It was goals galore really in Serie A if you want to look at it, and it kicked off with Milan drawn against Sampdoria 1-1 at the San Siro, and this was a game where, realistically speaking, Milan should have been losing in the first half because they were not the best side. They were not pressing as good as they should have been. The return of Benasser at least gave them some sort of stability in that midfield, to counter that. Sampdoria had a couple of glorious opportunities in the first half, but they didn't score. They were really breaching the sort of makeshift defense of Milan, particularly on the right-hand side, as Alexis Salamakis was used as a right-back for AC Milan with the injuries for the likes of Davide Calabria and of course Diego Dalot being used only as a subbench and also picking up a knock, so he wasn't exactly a shoe-in. The goal coming in from a defensive mistake from Theo Hernandez in the second half, and the 57th minute, Quagliarella opening the scoring, taking advantage of the situation, seeing Donnarumma being out of his net, and he just lobbed it past him, 1-0 for Sampdoria before the hour mark in the game. Late on in the game, and of course Jens-Peter Hauge proved to be a super sub really, and saved a point for Milan against Sampdoria. I mean, officially speaking, I think the title race is done for AC Milan. We can really say that. It's probably, they should be worrying about their Champions League position more than anything else. And those worries should be justified because the other results around them say so. And we start from Bergamo as Atalanta defeated Udinese 3-2. It was a really great performance, 2-0. Inside 43 minutes for Atalanta, it looked all said and done, but Roberto Pereira's goal in the 45th minute for Udinese made it really nervous. Duvin Sparta made it 3-1 again, but Jens Stig Larsson made it 3-2 for Udinese, and it was nervous again until the end of the time, but Atalanta sort of hung on in the last 10 minutes and grind out a 3-2 win to make it 2 points behind Milan on the table. I mean, realistically speaking, it looks like they have a more of a chance to catch up to Inter than AC Milan do, considering the performance that they're in right now. Atalanta are on such a decent form really in the league. They only lost to Inter in the last 8 matches in the league, and of course the other losses being the double header against Real Madrid in the Champions League. 7 wins out of the last 8. It's an incredible form for Atalanta, and I think deservedly so. We could say that they will be the top 4, and they will make it into the top 4 of the Serie A this season. Benevento drawn against Parma 2-2 after going 1-0 up thanks to Kamil Glik. The equaliser came in from Jasmin Kurtic in the 55th minute. 67th minute, Artur Ionita made it 2-1, but Denis Mann made it 2-2 for Parma, saving a point for Parma. Relegation strugglers, Parma, I might add. Benevento with 30 points at 15. They seem pretty safe, although they still, the danger is still there. Torino 24, Spezia are behind them really. It could be a pretty interesting end of the season in that regard. Hellas Verona managed to go away to Cagliari and bring a result 2-0, although being one man down in the end. Antonin Barak scoring the 54th minute goal for them, the assist of Mikel Veloso in a game which Cagliari dominated, particularly in the second half, but obviously Hellas Verona defended really well until the 98th minute, with Kevin Lasagna adding the second goal, capitalising on the stretched defensive Cagliari, again looking for those equaliser late on, racing for that equaliser, and Cagliari managed to make it Hellas Verona managed to make it 2-0 for them. This result, of course, takes them up to 8th on the table at 48 points, but definitely no chance of top 4 or even top 6, with 10 points removed from Roma as 5th. Genoa managed to hold Fiorentina to a draw 1-1, and Fiorentina, of course, had been playing with 10 men since the 51st minute after Frank Ribéry has been sent off, and all the action and the goal happened in the first half. Matteo Destro opened the scoring for Genoa in the 13th minute before Dusan Vlahovic made it 1-1 in the 23rd minute and gave Fiorentina the equaliser. The game stood that way till the end, despite Genoa looking for that second goal and having more chances. Lazio with 2 red cards and 2 players being sent off, with 9 men in that game late on after sort of a lot of fracas broke down in the end. Joaquin Correa and Manuel Azzari, the goal scorers. I mean, one of the goal scorers really, Manuel Azzari, and the assister of that goal scorer, Joaquin Correa, was sent off late on, but not before Lazio made sure that they win the game. 56th minute opener for Manuel Azzari. The equaliser was brilliant. It was a beautiful overhead kick. I mean, I would bet that is more beautiful than Ronaldo's overhead kick. If you don't believe me, really check it out. The goal from Daniele Verdi was amazing in the 73rd minute. Felipe Caicedo from the spot made it 2-1 for Lazio, of course, with with the red cards being at the end, and the fracas really everything broke loose in that game in Roma. Napoli managed to defeat Crotone 4-3, stamping, some sort of approval and, sending a message before the game against Juventus in the midweek, tying on points with Juventus before the midweek with 56 points. So it's going to be a real sort of a break in the partnership kind of game between Napoli and Juventus in the midweek. 4-3 against Crotone. Napoli went 3-1 up, and despite that, they managed to make it nervous for them. Quick fire double from Crotone in the second half of the first quarter of an hour, made it 3-3, and the game was very, very nervous until the 72nd minute with Giovanni Di Lorenzo making it 4-3 for Napoli, giving them the 3 points. And again, before a big game against Juventus in the midweek, this is what was needed for Napoli to keep the chase going for those top four. They could overleap Atalanta if they defeat Juventus on Wednesday. Sassuolo drawn against Roma 2-2, of course. Roma definitely, missed on an opportunity to get closer to the top four, really, with the 25-minute penalty from Lorenzo Pellegrini being the opener, and then, of course, Hamad Traore equalised for Sassuolo before Bruno Perez, making it 2-1 for Roma. But in the last 5 minutes, Giacomo Raspadori made it 2-2 for Sassuolo and clinched a point out of the jaws of death, really, from AS Roma, taking the point that could have helped Roma. I mean, normally would have got them a little bit closer to the top four, but now it's 5 points behind Napoli and 1 point behind the 6th spot for Lazio, the qualifying spot for the Europa League. Another 2-2 draw. It was in Torino, in the Torino derby between Juventus and Torino. Another unconvincing performance from the old lady, the Bianconeri, despite dominating the game, but it was to no avail, really. Federico Chiesa's goal in the first minute, the 30th minute was the first of the 2 goals for Juventus. Antonio Sanabria managed to equalise in 27th minute, and then right after the whistle in the break, 2-1 for Torino in the first minute of the second half by Antonio Sanabria as well, and it was until the 79th minute where Cristiano Ronaldo managed to make it 2-1 or 2-2 for Juventus, saving them a point out of their skin, really. They could have lost, and they could have ended the week in the 5th position here before the game again against Napoli. It's a crucial game for them in terms of defining the top 4 spots and saving the best for the top spot in the Serie A, of course. Inter, the champions elect at this point, I would say grinding out a win against Bologna. It wasn't easy, it was really hard. Bologna are a tough nut to crack, they're tough to break down, and they needed a 31st minute from Romelu Lukaku goal to break down things, and it stood that way until the end of the game. Inter couldn't really do a lot besides of the goal, but obviously this was, energy conserving right after the international break. Certainly changes were to be made. Some players, exhausted on the international break, they needed to have some rest, and they needed to have some light games, despite the fact that Lukaku, who scored, wasn't exactly substituted. So it definitely was not the most, it wasn't the most easy of games, but for Inter, they ground out the result, they keep winning, they keep marching towards the title, and of course they will play Sassuolo in the midweek as well, in a game. They still have a game in hand, so this could go to 11 points ahead of AC Milan, and that should probably settle the title race in Italy, of course. The table of the Serie A at the moment stands like this: 68 points for Inter Milan, 60 for Milan, 58 for Atalanta, 56 for Juventus and Napoli before the game in hand together on Wednesday, 52 for Lazio, 51 for Roma, and for Verona 41, 40 for Sassuolo at 9th, 36 for Sampdoria, 34 for Bologna, 33 for Udinese, 32 for Genoa, 30 for Fiorentina, 30 for Benevento, 29 for Spezia, 24 for Torino, and the 3 at the bottom, Cagliari 22, 20 for Parma, and Crotone with 15 points. That's it from me. I was your boy, the HOD, the PSP. Like, share, comment on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel, enable notifications to receive all the updates from these episodes, which you can listen to on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or any other platform. And of course, follow us on social media at PSP on Twitter, PSP on Instagram. And until next time, I will see you soon. Goodbye.